Today's gospel is the longest one in the whole 3-year cycle of gospels. It's dramatic and suspenseful, and it's the turning point of John's story of Jesus. In it, Jesus raises Lazarus, the dead beloved brother of his good friends, Martha and Mary. There are many witnesses who will spread the miraculous story, a story that worries and angers the Jewish leaders. Because of Lazarus' resurrection, they decide Jesus must die. The story only appears in John's gospel. In the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jewish leaders also decide that Jesus must be killed, but in those books, they do so after the angry and furious Jesus cleanses the temple, making those in power fear he could become a leader of a violent revolution or rebellion. The story of Lazarus has always been popular. Martha and Mary send a message to Jesus that their brother is ill. Jesus' reaction seems strange. He tells his disciples that Lazarus' sickness will not lead to death, that it is for God's glory. He doesn't leave for Bethany immediately and decides to delay his departure for 2 days. Among the many things that distinguish John's gospel from the others is that Jesus always exhibits foreknowledge of what is going to happen to him. Over and over, he speaks of God's glory and that he will be glorified through it. And God's glory is shorthand in the Gospel of John for the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension. And in that gospel, Jesus always knows exactly where his journey is leading him. But why does Jesus wait those 2 days? Well, the common belief in those days was that when someone died, their spirit hovered about the body for 3 days. On the 4th day, the body, which was never embalmed or preserved in any way, would begin to decay and smell. And Jesus wants to make sure that there is no doubt that Lazarus has died when he arrives after 4 days. When he comes to Bethany, Martha greets him. Her words express a complaint, combined with her profound belief in him. She begins with, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." The same words her sister will use later. But then she immediately makes a statement of faith, telling him she knows God will give him whatever he asks. He goes on then to speak of the resurrection, and Martha misunderstands and assumes he is referring to the final resurrection on the last day of human history. Jesus then speaks theologically in words that we will echo in today's offertory hymn, "Today, I am the bread of life." He says in that hymn, we quote him saying, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." Mary then appears and repeats her sister's complaint. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." She's followed by all the people who have gathered at their home to mourn Lazarus. In verse 33, a rather famous verse because it's easy to remember, we read that Jesus was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. It has become a tradition for Bible translators to soften what the original Greek actually says there. It says that he was angry and troubled. And Bible scholars in the last 50 years have taken note of this discrepancy and written voluminously about what it might mean. They argue that earlier commentators had then misinterpreted verse 35, the famously shortest verse in the King James Version of the Bible. Jesus wept. That early interpretation was that Jesus was simply mourning Lazarus and overcome with grief by his passing. But modern scholars, recalling that he is actually angry and troubled, have different theories of why Jesus weeps. After all, in John's gospel, Jesus always knows exactly what is going to happen. He knows he will soon lift his eyes to heaven, call on his Father, and Lazarus will live again. So why does he cry? Is he angry at the unbelief of some of the people? Is he disturbed because he realizes what he's about to do will lead to his passion and death? Is he upset because this has all become a public spectacle instead of an intimate miracle for his good friends in Bethany? In the end, most scholars contend that Jesus, the Word made flesh, God and man, is crying in public acknowledgement of the pain that death causes in all human life. That he weeps here for all of us who have been and all who will come, experiencing grief and death. When the miracle does happen, it's quick. He simply says, "Lazarus, come out." And bound in cloth, he walks from the tomb. How many of us, when a loved one is dying, have asked God to give that person the gift of Lazarus and to gift us a bit more time? And many of us have become angry at God because that just is not going to happen. The price for love is grief. I don't know who said that first, but I hear it quoted often. If we dare to love, and especially if we love extravagantly, we will grieve. And if grief is what we get for loving deeply, then ironically, we know we have loved well. Everyone's grief is different. We really have no right to judge anyone's grief as excessive or inadequate. Grief is totally unpredictable. We may find ourselves dry-eyed at the funeral of a loved one, and then inconsolable a month later on an ordinary day, doing ordinary things. So many of us have tried to numb our grief, to step aside from it, even pretend we are fine. The heartbreaking truth is we have to let ourselves feel the grief, to walk through it and allow ourselves to sit with it, to accept that it has become part of our life, but to know also that it will not prevent us from experiencing joy. I remember being in what seemed like a real fog when my mother died. I finally realized I needed to feel my grief and deliberately move out of the fog one step at a time. Since 2022, don't be afraid to share the grief you're feeling with all your family and friends ever. And if you need more help, please don't hesitate to ask for it. So back to 2022, since then, I've been listening to a podcast that Anderson Cooper offers on grief. It's called All There Is, and it's quite remarkable. It's also available on YouTube. He interviews people on their grief journeys, and yes, their stories are different and similar at the same time. Early on, he interviewed Stephen Colbert. When he was a child, his father and two brothers were killed in a plane crash. Colbert made a remarkable statement. He said he had learned, quote, to love the thing I most wish had not happened. He actually views his grief not as a burden, but as a gift that has given him deeper empathy with other people and stronger connections to those he loves, as well as to people who are suffering, all people who are suffering. He also noted that we cannot choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we carry our grief. Andrew Garfield, the actor, was also on Anderson's podcast, and in talking about grief, he said, quote, "The wound is the only route to the gift." Like Colbert, he was saying that embracing and accepting grief and loss leads to a deeper appreciation of life and fosters personal growth. I have a recording right now, today, of some excellent advice from a very little girl that Anderson played on last week's podcast, so let's listen to it.
Hold on.
Needs to be louder, yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, I think my Bluetooth speaker just went out.
Bluetooth mode.
I've been thinking a lot about kids and loss and how the death of a parent early on can completely change the trajectory of one's life. It certainly did with me. And I worry at times about not making it to see my 2 little boys grow up to be men. I think I will, but I like to talk to them a lot about how even though my dad died when he was 10, I feel him in my heart now, and how I believe he's with me and with them, and happy to see them growing up. I was really moved by the Instagram post I saw this week from James Vanderbeek's daughter, Amelia. She's just 9 years old, and her dad died last month on February 11th.
Today is my dad's birthday, and the number one thing for somebody's passing is to talk to them and let your emotions out. If you miss them, you can cry, you can talk to them. I talk to my dad every day, and I start with a sentence, and I say, "Hi Dad, I miss you, and I love you so much, and I'll never stop loving you." And I just tell him about my day, how I'm feeling, and I tell my family how.
Oh.
And I know he can hear me, but I can't. My mom can.
Well, basically, she talks about talking to her dad and how that helps her, which is good advice, right, from anybody, for those who are around us who have died. About 30 years ago, I made a list of relatives and friends who had died, a grief list, I guess, and every morning I recite their names in my prayers. I think I started with about 10 names, and there are now 110. I've memorized the list, which is not a great feat. It's something that's very easy to do over a long period of time. And all of these people are people who have meant something to me, people who have truly affected my life in some way. I don't really decide who is on the list. I get news that someone has died, and either I feel a tug to put the name on my list, or I don't. I looked at the list this week to see who is there from our St. Benedict family. Ruth Hammersmith, with whom I was blessed to spend the last years of her life, which lasted till she was 100. Sherry Bates, who was your and my deacon while I was interim here. Timothy Jiang, a man of incredible courage. Nancy, idol, always so optimistic and positive, and we both loved going to the movies. Linda, Lador, who came to Jesus' table and challenged us for the better. And Pearl Richardson, Donna's mom, a force to be reckoned with, and every inch a lady. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. The second person of the Trinity, the Christ, lived our life and understood and felt our grief and promised us this: those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Amen.